Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. My guest today is Dr. Rebecca Troy. Rebecca is a dyslexia and neuroscience coach who helps find solutions for struggling readers. She has over 20 years of experience with this disorder, and she genuinely wants to see people succeed. If you know of someone, a parent who maybe has a child with this diagnosis, or maybe they're concerned this is what is happening with their kiddo, I encourage you to point them to this conversation and then to her website because she has some great resources and a coaching program that I believe could help so many people. I was very excited to talk to Rebecca today, and I thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being a guest today. I am very excited to talk to you. I have a child with special needs. Dyslexia is not something that I've had to deal with, but I understand when you are a parent and you have a child that has extra needs. They have different needs than your typical children. It's important. And I love when I can find, as my kids were growing up, they're all grown now. When I found those teachers and those people that would work with my son who I knew genuinely wanted to help, that was a very big deal to me. I still appreciate those people so much. I'm friends with them on Facebook, and I just am so thankful. So I know that the work that you're doing with these kids is so valuable to the families. And I'm excited to learn how you even got started working with kids with dyslexia.
Yeah, you got it. Well, thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. But yeah, for me, dyslexia has been a part of my life for my whole life. I grew up inside of a dyslexic family, my parents, my brother, my extended family. And so I had the opportunity to see both the gifts that come with that brain profile, as well as some of the struggles. And then fast forward, I'm in education and I am teaching students that are at the high school level and the collegiate level that don't have the skills to read, like they've
Mm.
been missed along the way. Up until now, like as a mother of 2 dyslexic children, I see it from a different lens, and so it's been a part of my life my whole life.
Wow. So for people that don't understand, because I don't fully even understand, I always thought it is an issue with the way they see the words on the page, but explain what dyslexia is.
Yeah. So it's a neurobiological condition where, if we were to look at the brain, there are two key areas that have been studied to have underdevelopment. So one is back here in the occipital lobe where we see letters, and then the other one is over the parietal temporal lobe where we hear sounds. So it's literally a disconnect in the brain between letters and sounds. But this can be a highly intelligent person, a person who's trying very hard. Like it has nothing to do with either of those things. It's just when we ask for a language task, like, hey, spell this word, or write me this paragraph, or read this paragraph. There are certain areas of the brain that need to light up in order to do that. And for a person with dyslexia, they don't yet. So those are things that you can develop and you can reconnect those areas of the brain, but that's kind of a neurobiological condition that exists. Most of it is genetic. I would say anywhere between 50 to 80% of the cases are heritable, but you
Mm.
can also have that profile through your environment. So if you
Yeah.
didn't have exposure to print or there wasn't access to some of those materials, your brain wouldn't develop those things.
Do you think that is the most common reason people have trouble learning to read?
Yeah, so it's actually when we look at learning disabilities, it's such a terrible term
Right.
that when we look at that in general, 80% of those cases are from dyslexia or reading
Wow.
specifically. So yeah, it's a hugely underappreciated and undertested area of learning that I think we could do a whole lot better with
Right.
the whole facets. Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked in a school for 5 years, and it always just blew my mind how kids could move on from grade to grade without being able to read. And I understand, the education system is just such a mess, and the teachers are overwhelmed, and there's not enough of this and too much of, you know what I mean? There's just so many factors that affect that. But it always broke my heart to see these kids, not all of them, but there were children that were moving on from grade to grade that couldn't read, and I had such a hard time wrapping my brain around that, how they were able to keep moving on, but they do. They do. It's crazy to me. What are some early warning signs for parents, looking at dyslexia if they think their child needs to be tested?
So, it's interesting. Like if you ask a pediatrician or somebody who's doing an evaluation, they'll say, "Oh, this child needs to be 8 or 9 years old before we could really do any kind of formal evaluation." And that's just simply not true.
Yeah.
Like you can actually start seeing signs as early as 2 and 3 years old. So there are some language things that kids do, like, "Oh, hey, I'd like you to play a game with words. Can you tell me a word that rhymes with top?" And the ability to do that and have it a picture in your mind of like, oh, top that's got this starting and this ending, and I'm going to keep this part the same, and I'm going to change out the beginning sound. For a kid with dyslexia who doesn't have the ability to see and or connect those things to sound, that's like almost impossible.
Right.
But we would start to see those games not being played. So, another big one is the discrepancy between the child's verbal intelligence and what they're doing on paper. So, for example, my own son, he would walk into a room and he'll tell you, "Oh, mom, look at this. This is a parasaurolophus. And did you know that he has a symbiotic relationship with this other bird because they do this and this for each other?" And so that is his verbal intelligence, his vocabulary, his spoken language. But
Yeah.
when you ask him to read, uh, "The cat is red," well, it wouldn't be red, but you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
massive struggle in doing that. So the
Mm.
discrepancy between those things would be a huge red flag.
Oh, wow. So you said that you could notice signs, as early as 2, but when should they start being concerned? Like, when should a parent say, "I'm going to find a way to have my child be tested"? Like, what age do you think?
So a lot of those norm reference tests start as early as 5. Um,
Okay.
so it's not true that you have to wait until your child has failed multiple years in order to reach in and say, "Is there something going on? Should we see if there's a discrepancy?" Because ultimately, when you get that diagnosis, they're looking for a discrepancy between the intelligence and the present level of performance in language. So if
Mm.
there's a huge gap between like, wow, this child is doing really, really well in everything else, and then we've got this gap in language, that's where that diagnosis comes from.
I gotcha. So you talk a lot, I've read, some of your stuff on your website. You talk a lot about neuroplasticity. Can you explain that, what that means in simple terms?
Yeah. So it's essentially the brain responding to a stimulus that you're doing repetitively over and over. So for us, it's daily work that we do for 10 to 15 minutes, but it's helping the brain to respond differently because of what we're doing day to day.
Okay. I know you said this was hereditary. I guess it's just so much more common than I realized. But why do so many struggle in traditional classroom setting? Every child is different. I have a son with autism. Every child with autism is different. You can't group all dyslexic people into one group. Do they all learn differently? Or is there a way to teach them together as a group? Or is this an individual thing and that's why it's so hard in a classroom setting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think really, dyslexia, while it's a common term, it's on a continuum, just like everything else. So you can have a very mild case of dyslexia, and you can have a very severe case of dyslexia, and everything in between. And so, kind of putting kids in a group and saying, "Oh, you've got dyslexia, let's do this." I mean, I think in general, there could be some things that might help for you, but that doesn't apply to everybody. And so maybe you also have co occurring struggles with working memory or processing speed. What you need might be this, and what somebody else might need is just more phonological awareness. So you're right when you say the best possible outcome is that individualized support.
Individualize. And what kind of help do you offer to kids and to families that are going through this? Because it looks like it's helping tremendously, and people are having great success with this. But can you kind of give us some strategies that you use?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the best analogies that I could use to describe this is ultimately you want kids to be reading and writing at a running speed. You want the brain to be firing quickly. You don't want it to have to be overtasked, and you can just like run or sprint in the brain in order to do those things. But sometimes, you do need to back it up and say, let me first teach you how to walk. And so things like phonics and structured literacy and a lot of the practices that the science of reading are saying like this is really really important
Yeah.
are really important and we have to teach those things, but there's a whole developmental phase that's before that, which I would liken to like crawling. The body has to be able to do the motor functions of crawling before you could walk, before
Right.
you could run. And so, what we're finding is that a lot of clients that come to us after multiple years of intervention, it's not like parents haven't been trying, they've invested significantly in private tutors and interventions and all of these other things, but what's really missing is the right starting point. So there are cognitive and executive function tasks that have to be developed first. So your brain has to be able to hold things in working memory. You have to have the processing speed. So for example, if I tell you, um, read this word, it's immunodeficiency. And by the time I finally get through it, because my processing speed is slower and the amount of time it takes me to decode through that is slower, I've completely forgot what it is. And I couldn't
Right.
tell you anything about that word, anyways. And so, if we don't address those foundational bits first, you
Yeah.
can do the phonics and the walking all day long, but it doesn't ever really stick because we've missed this bit.
Yeah.
That makes
For
sense.
for any parent that's listening that is feeling overwhelmed, I know they're gonna wanna connected to you and find out, what you're able to offer, but what are some things that they could be doing at home, even right now, before they get started in that?
Yeah, I think, if you don't know whether or not you have dyslexia, I think one of the best things to do would be to give your kids some kind of a screener, get more information, really get informed and feel like, gosh, that is what this is, or it's
Yeah.
not, because having specific information in front of you helps you to make a good plan. So, for us specifically, we have really frequent workshops, like about once
Okay.
a month, where you can come and do 3 norm referenced assessments. They're the same ones that you would do if you were in a clinic, but you're not waiting for a formal evaluation. You're not waiting for somebody's permission to say, like, I'm going to take a look at this. Like, you yourself can take a look
Yeah.
at this over a weekend and have some real answers about what's actually going on, which I think is incredibly helpful.
That is, and that's done all online? Or is that in person?
Yeah, no, so we do virtual workshops. So we've got clients kind of
Wonderful.
coming up from all over the place, but I think
Yeah.
if you're not sure that's what it is, that's what I would recommend to start with. But if you do know and you're like, gosh, I am the person that's been doing 2 or 3, 4 years of tutoring plus it
Yeah.
just doesn't seem to be working, it's likely because it's not starting at the right place. And so I would, you know, definitely check out some of the resources, some of the blogs, but we offer complimentary calls to people on to speak with our team. I
Yeah.
would just call and speak with the team and see if it's a fit.
That is wonderful. I know that is gonna be such a relief to families. I just think about even though my situation was different, I'm telling you, I appreciated those people who knew where I was coming from and were genuinely able to help. So I know that's gonna be just such a relief for these parents. What have you learned? You've done this for so long, and like you said, you grew up in it. Now you're a mom, working with it, and you've been teaching. What are some things that have surprised you maybe all these years in what you're doing?
That's a great question as well. I think how interconnected all of the systems of the body really are. So, what you eat affects your brain.
Right.
How you sleep affects your brain. So even things like what kids have for lunch can have an impact in
Yeah.
what learning and cognition and all of that looks like. And so I do think it's very common for dyslexia specifically to have other things going on at the same time. So my child
Mhm.
has dyslexia, but they also have dysgraphia and they also have ADHD, or they might also have auditory processing disorder, or they might, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
very difficult as a parent to try to navigate that, to
Mhm.
say, where am I supposed to go? Like I'm going to go to the eye doctor and then I'm going to go to the audiologist and then I'm going to ear,
Mhm.
nose, and throat. And trying to put all of this information together in a package that makes sense for my child. And I feel like I'm wasting time and they're still struggling. So I would say the interconnection and the need for all of that to be synthesized for a parent so that they know from like one place, here's what that actually means, and here's what that's actually telling you you should do, is just such a need for parents.
Absolutely. And it is, it's so overwhelming. It's so
It
overwhelming.
is.
Yeah, my son is grown and he lives with us, and there are still things that I struggle with. I mean, he's a grown man.
Yeah.
Still I'm still being a mom, and there are still frustrations that, trying to make that connection with him. And I know it's gotta be rewarding when you see people that you're working with who maybe you see it click or you see the success. Have you seen, their confidence grow and just wonderful things happen with them? Do you have a story you could share maybe?
Yes, absolutely. I've got all kinds
I'm
of them.
sure you do.
So one that comes to mind is there was a young man named Caleb. He was 10 years old when he came to us, but he has multiple diagnoses. He was dyslexic. He has apraxia of speech. He's autistic, and he was in a public setting where the belief was Caleb really can't do a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And so we're going to provide accommodations for Caleb. We're going to put him in this classroom. We're going to give him this kind of work. And his mom, thank goodness, wasn't having it. She just said, I know he's so bright and he's capable of more than the box that they've put him in. And so I don't know what I'm going to do about this, but this just feels wrong to me. We ended up crossing paths and she said, I think I could do this. So she did work with him, and I think she mentioned that they only missed 2 days out of the 4 months. So she worked with him for
Wow.
10 to 15 minutes for 4 months straight. It ended up being 4.5 months, but he went from the 7th percentile to the 79th in
Wow.
4.5 months. And so she was just like, everything about this kid is totally different. I think he
Wow.
wants to learn. He feels confident. He's reading books. He's engaging with peers differently.
Yeah.
And so you just look at the belief that's underneath. And I think that that's just such a powerful message for parents. Just because your kid has a diagnosis or a label, that doesn't mean that that equals this kind of life for them. And so her belief was really, really paramount to what happened next. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, everything is different for him now.
That's amazing. I love hearing that. I love that. That's so good. I'm gonna make sure, people are able to get connected to you, get to the resources, get that call with you. But if there's something that you would like to leave parents with today before we go, what is an encouraging word you could give them?
Oh gosh, I would say trust yourself.
Yeah.
You spend more time with that little person than anybody on the planet. And so you know what they're feeling, you know if something isn't right. And every time that we've had a parent say like, "Oh gosh, I was told by my teacher, I was told by the pediatrician, or I was told by someone that I knew and trusted, like everything was fine, but I knew in my gut it wasn't." I would say trust that, because as a parent, you know when something doesn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
So lean into that.
I love that. I think that's so true. Those mamas, we know. We know.
You do.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been so good. Thank you so much for being a guest today and for sharing about your work. I cannot wait to put this out into the world.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yes, you too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks for listening to Life Stories Podcast. There are a few ways you can support me so that I can continue putting out great content. You can like and share this episode, send it to a friend that you think might be encouraged by it, subscribe to my channel, whichever format you're listening to, and tell people about my podcast. You can also buy me a virtual coffee. The link is below and it's also at the bottom of my website. Every donation helps me continue doing what I'm doing. Thanks for being here.